Our country, the Philippines, and the rest of the world have always been confronted with societal issues such as poverty, hunger, environmental degradation, malnutrition, quality of education, unemployment, pollution, traffic, and inequality. In September 2000, the United Nations, through the 147 heads of state, committed to address poverty and other social issues. By adopting the Millennium Development Goals, after 15 years, the UN replaced the MDGs with the Sustainable Development Goals, which now covers 17 priority goals. Similarly, the Philippine Lasallian family, through the Lasallian institutions, is committed in fulfilling its mission to bring forth awareness and deeper understanding of social realities, effect liberating action, and be in solidarity with progressive elements of the larger community to bring forth a society that is keeping with God's plan. To put these guiding principles into action, Lasallians must be agents of change and be responsive to these social realities. This can happen if they are guided by the Lasallian reflection framework, which starts with see, experience, or masid danas. Next is analysis, reflection, or suri nilay. And lastly is commitment, action, or taya kilos. The commitment, action, or the taya kilos phase must affect how we do things. De La Salle University, as a Catholic educational institution that gives prime value to research, has the following research thrusts where the reflection of the process must be anchored on: poverty alleviation, promotion of peace and social justice, protection of vulnerable sectors, bridging social divides, stewardship of God's creation, and influence, governance, and policy. To participate in similar discourse, De La Salle University encourages its students to adopt the ideal speech situation espoused by Jürgen Habermas in his theory of communicative action. For the ideal speech situation to happen, people engaged in discussions must observe that every subject with the competence to speak and act is allowed to take part in a discourse. Everyone is allowed to introduce any assertion whatever. Everyone is allowed to introduce any assertion whatever into the discourse. Everyone is allowed to express their attitudes, desires, and needs without any hesitation, and no speaker may be prevented by internal or external coercion from exercising his rights as laid down in 1 and 2. Once these guidelines are observed, learners and researchers may take part in doing their action research that can address issues and concerns related to food, nutrition and health, sustainability, environment and energy, women, children and family, living culture and contemporary societies, and learners and learning innovations.
Let us first define what action research is. It is a common approach wherein systematic inquiries are conducted and aim to bring change in specific context. According to Mayer, action research strength lies in its focus on generating holistic solutions to problems and the ability to empower the people by getting them involved with the research process and its continuous development together with the implementation period. The researchers will need to develop and use skills to achieve their goal, such as careful planning, sharpened observation and listening, evaluation, and critical reflection. It is a continuous cycle of reflection and action over time. In order for action research to have an impact in addressing a certain phenomena, we must continuously act upon it and continuously improve the process and the implementation. Next, what is critical realism? It is a philosophical tool for identifying causal mechanisms within a particular field of activity. It combines a general philosophy of science with a philosophy of social science. It is a philosophical approach initially developed by Roy Basker. It is an approach wherein we consider different branches of science in order to understand and provide a holistic solution to a certain phenomena we are trying to address. Let's take a look at the fishbone analysis. When we implement this type of analysis, we consider possible causes that potentially lead to a certain event. Causes covers from but not limited to measurement, materials, methods, manpower, and machines, all of which falls from the formal science that we are accustomed to. When the researchers are grounded with critical realism, we thus not only cover formal science, but we consider natural and social science as well. Together with the potential causes stated before, we are now also considering the following: behavior, environment, relationship, structure, and biological influences. Why researchers must be grounded with critical realism when doing action research? Take a look at the picture of the iceberg. Most of the time, when we picture an iceberg, we are only familiar with the one above water. But in reality, there is a bigger part of it underwater, and most importantly, the other tip of the iceberg underwater, which is the root of it all. In application, we are not only considering the obvious reasons why an event is happening, but we are also studying the reasons why it is happening and how did it happen. We will be considering all branches of science related to the event, which covers natural science, formal science, and social science. Action research, along with critical realism, subscribes to the notion that it is not enough to understand the social world. We must also act to change it to further human well being.
Let's delve further into critical realism to better understand its importance in action research. As a philosophy, critical realism centers on the separation of ontology and epistemology that drives the need for continuous scientific investigation. It is anchored on three core principles. Ontological realism asserts the intransitivity of reality. According to this principle, a large part of what is real exists and operates independently of our awareness, knowledge, and theories about it as humans. Not all structures and driving forces in the world equate to events that are observable by humans. Hence, reality cannot be defined solely by what can be represented by empirical data. Epistemic relativism asserts the transitivity of human knowledge. Knowledge is human created and stems from what we have collectively experienced and observed using our senses. In this sense, our knowledge of reality is influenced and also limited by our biology, history, society, and culture. With our knowledge being affected by these factors, it is fallible and we cannot claim to have a complete and accurate view of reality. Given the intransitivity of reality and transitivity of human knowledge, we must exercise judgmental rationalism. We acknowledge that the differences in our experiences and perceptions as unique individuals will give rise to varying and possibly competing claims about the world. This, however, does not mean that all these competing claims are equally correct about reality. We therefore need to commit to investigation by adopting different scientific methods so that we can judge which among these claims is more plausible. What therefore is real? Basker explains that reality is stratified into three domains. First, the domain of the empirical encompasses the surface of reality that can be observed. These are results of actions taken or events that have transpired and have been experienced by humans. This layer of reality includes our knowledge of what we perceive to be happening because it is within the set of events that human senses can interpret. The domain of the actual includes events that have been triggered by forces in the world. This includes events that have been observed by humans and those that have not. Finally, the domain of the real includes structures and mechanisms that have the ability to trigger or constrain events, even if they have not actually done so yet. It is considered the deepest layer of reality and encompasses all things that are part of reality and causes of why things are as they are. Given the stratified model, we can therefore say that the world is an open system, wherein a wide variety of causes in the domain of the real constantly interact with each other. They have both the potential to trigger events and to constrain them as well. This includes events that we experience and those that we don't. By adopting this line of thinking, reality then includes everything that has the potential to affect something, whether or not it actually does. This gives rise to many different accounts about events that occur. People experience events differently because of differences in perception and hence have different theories about their causes. All of these theories and beliefs can be considered real by definition because they shape how we act and how we view the world. This, however, doesn't mean just because these beliefs are real that they're also true. Varying and sometimes conflicting theories about events makes it necessary for us to employ systematic investigations in order to continuously draw closer to the truth about the causes that bring about the events we experience. This is where science comes in. It uses observation and sense perception to describe phenomena and seeks to investigate the underlying causes to explain phenomena. To do so, science employs experimentation, which involves experimental production and experimental control. Experimental production is the creation of a desired sequence of events to discover a possible causal law. We create a set of procedures which we think can lead to an understanding of the cause of the phenomenon. It involves preparing the necessary conditions that make it possible for us to observe the events as they are affected by their underlying causes. In recognition that the real world holds a multitude of causes that can trigger or constrain events which affect the outcome of the investigation, we employ experimental control to create an artificial environment by isolating variables which may interfere with the phenomenon being investigated. In doing so, we can systematically manipulate the conditions in the experiment with the hopes of better understanding the underlying cause of the phenomenon. Aside from establishing that reality includes a multitude of causes and that it impacts scientific methods, critical realism also highlights the principle of ontological emergence. There are different types of causal factors in the domain of the real. At the lowest order, physical causes are the most basic and encompass those that affect the structure of matter and fundamental principles governing them. Biological causes encompass those that affect the structure and function of living organisms. Psychological causes include the cognitive functions of the human brain and how they affect human behavior. And finally, social causes at the highest layer are the most complex and include those that affect human interactions and relationships. Higher order causes exhibit a rootedness in the existence of more basic causes. Their existence depends on and is subjected to laws of causes in the lower layers of the hierarchy. However, they are not completely determined by lower causes because they develop emergent properties distinct to their level which cannot be simply reduced to the properties of their lower order causes. Although higher order causes exhibit a dependency, they also have an extent of control over lower order causes in that they are capable of enabling or constraining operations of lower order causes. This means causality is bidirectional in the sense that lower order causes affect higher order causes and vice versa. This principle is called dual control. The principles of ontological emergence and dual control tells us that causes at each ontological level have autonomy. We cannot simply break them down into the properties of lower order causes that constitute them. Hence, they require a science of their own, using investigative methods unique to each level to study them. Since phenomena that we can observe will always involve a wide variety of both lower order and high order causes that influence each other, we cannot simply rely on the methods and theories of a single science to explain them. This tells us that various events we can observe, including those issues we humans face in our lives, run deeper than they seem, brought about by a complex interaction of various physical, biological, psychological, and social factors. A critical realist philosophy can be used to gain a more complete understanding of their underlying causes and bring about more effective interventions. This will involve cooperation among researchers from different fields to investigate these from different angles and approach the solution in an interdisciplinary manner.
What is applied interdisciplinary research? Criterion for interdisciplinary research is that it includes two or more disciplines or area of knowledge. But the most important aspect of interdisciplinary research is that it should integrate knowledge. This is a criterion that marks a difference between multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. Dannermark, as a critical realist, defined interdisciplinary research as any study or group of studies undertaken by scholars from all relevant levels that are needed to answer the research question. The research is integrating analysis of structures, mechanisms, and outcomes at these levels by using study design and methodology that are most appropriate for respective levels. The output is knowledge emergence, which requires the use of skills of the involved researchers throughout multiple phases of the research process. These highlighted concepts cover different aspects of ontology, epistemology, and methodology. In critical realist interdisciplinary research, it is necessary first to disambiguate ontology and epistemology to avoid epistemic fallacy or the tendency to conflate being with the knowledge of being. It is to avoid reducing reality to empirical observations and to avoid defining reality as identical with empirical grounded conceptions. This disambiguation of ontology and epistemology has important implications on how researchers should conceive scientific knowledge in relation to the object of study. A critical realist interdisciplinary research undergoes different phases, starting from the planning phase, disciplinary phase, multidisciplinary teamwork including cross-disciplinary understanding, transdisciplinary phase or integrative phase, and the interdisciplinary phase. In the planning phase, the first thing to do is to decide whether interdisciplinary research is necessary. Is interdisciplinarity required to answer the research question? After determining that interdisciplinary research is needed, the researcher will identify the relevant levels of reality. Researchers will now turn from epistemology to ontology, from the question of disciplines or area of knowledge to levels of reality. a necessary laminated system, or a preliminary estimate of the types of structures and mechanisms must be created to achieve the research objective. Based on this, the researchers can decide which areas of knowledge must be considered and which relevant scientific experts must be recruited as well. Once the different levels and the experts needed have been identified and recruited in the planning phase, researchers will now face the disciplinary understanding, also called as reductionist phase, which focuses on the generative powers at different levels. Researchers analyzes the structures, mechanisms, and context and its importance for a holistic understanding of the object for research. In this phase, experts can do their part of research independently from each other. Each expert will contribute their specialized, in-depth knowledge. The individual researcher must approach the issue in accordance with the fundamental principles of critical realist meta theory, such as the critical realist embrace, in which critical realist utilizes the insights of other meta theories, or simply having open-mindedness and tolerance for disciplines other than his own. Next phase is the multidisciplinary teamwork, including cross-disciplinary understanding. In this phase, an expert views one discipline from the perspective of another. Issues are studied by applying methodologies of other disciplines. The fact that there are ontological reasons to use different methods at different levels is what we call methodological specificity and pluralism. Every scientific expert should be aware of the terminologies and knowledge used by other disciplines, as concepts must be clearly defined to avoid false consensus and false disagreement. To achieve the degree of learning required in this phase, other key aspects needed aside from open-mindedness are mutual respect and tolerance. Researchers start to learn from each other about how their varying disciplines can contribute to problem understanding and solution development. The process enters the transdisciplinary phase where the possibility of emerging new ideas and theories increases to form more comprehensive conceptualizations of the object of investigation. This involves the most fundamental aspect of interdisciplinary research process, the integration of knowledge that results in epistemic emergence. There are tools such as necessary laminated system, model of four-planar social being, and seven-scale model, which can be used to transcend the boundaries of an area of knowledge or achieve transdisciplinary. In this phase, priori reductionism should be avoided. Interdisciplinary research does not prioritize any area of knowledge. The last phase in the interdisciplinary research process is the interdisciplinary phase, or the outcome, an integrated knowledge about the object. It provides the holistic understanding of the involved structure and mechanisms. The outcomes of the interdisciplinary research are unique and could not have been produced by the component disciplines separately. The challenge for this final stage is the dissemination of the result, which includes recommendations for policymakers and practitioners. It is crucial and requires careful wording and experiences. Doing an interdisciplinary research is not just about developing new knowledge and contributing to further development of a research agenda about a phenomenon. It aims to intervene and change reality.
For discussion purposes, let us take a look at one of the esteros located in Binondo, Manila. Estero de Magdalena is a tributary Pasig River system. The Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission focuses on the clearing, relocation, cleanup operations, and public information campaigns due to the alarming solid waste present in the waterway. Despite the continuous actions being done by PRRC and its team, large volume of solid waste recurred in the estero. The goal of PRRC is to rehabilitate Estero de Magdalena and the removal of the solid waste recurring there. Initially, possible causes of this includes but not limited to the informal settlers, improper segregation, insufficient public information, and unavailability of disposal facilities. Through a critical realist perspective, guided by the Lasallian framework and principles, through an interdisciplinary action research, we can provide proposals which includes the study regarding the area's governance and program implementation and the community's behavior and environment. Interdisciplinary scientific studies for innovative leaders, guided by the Lasallian principles and a critical realist perspective, aims to acknowledge the fact that there are multiple causes that results to an event without personally witnessing prior events or conditions, to be open to the idea that events are not only affected by formal science, but rather by formal, natural, and social science. And lastly, It aims to continuously implement projects that would improve the well being of humans.